We live in a time when it seems like the bike industry has gone crazy. Bikes are crazy expensive. Components are absurdly expensive. SRAM recently came out with a group set that had a $600 cassette. Campy came out with a group set that costs, a mere $4,000. Electronic derailleurs can cost anywhere from $300 all the way up to $700. And what's worse is when they break, they become e-waste. In this video, we're going to talk with Erin from Madrone Components, who's working to create an alternative. Madrone caught her eye at the Made show a few weeks ago. They first started by offering repair kits to these, crazy expensive rear derailleurs. And recently they've decided to go ahead and make their own that is highly repairable and also highly compatible. We're going to talk about how they started and where they're going. If you guys enjoy these discussions and these topics, please consider supporting the channel by joining us on Patreon. It is the best way to do it. We're not beholden to the big component companies, so we can make videos like this. Patreon is too much commitment. I get it. Consider picking up a shirt or some stickers from the merch store. Let's get on with the interview. Your product, really jumped out just because, like, philosophically, I'm really into, like, right to repair, and like I think bike components are super expensive and they should last as long as possible.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it seems as if like new stuff is just hostile to that idea.
definitely. Especially with the wireless, the electronic derailleurs, it's more than just a high cost item to somebody. It's actually e-waste. And so
Right.
finding a way to extend the life of those, you can double or triple the life just by rebuilding them. And the servos, there are ways to permanently damage the servo mechanism. There's gear teeth in there that can get stripped. There's the pogo pins that connect with your battery. So those things can go wrong. Those are a little bit harder to repair. We do repair the pogo pins, but yeah, if there's something just mechanical like the linkage or the bushings are worn out, that
Yeah.
stuff is very repairable. So why not keep the rest of it going?
Let's back up a bit and tell me how Madrone started and what your mission is.
The actual story behind it is pretty simple. It was my first 12-speed drivetrain, mechanical, on a newer bike, brand new bike at the time. So my first introduction to 12-speed, and I just couldn't believe how sensitive it was right off the
Hmm.
bat. I think after my first ride, I was adjusting the derailleur and pretty frustrated, to be honest with you. Like, I don't need one more gear. I just need this thing to work right. It's kind of what I was thinking. And I even went so far as to I replaced almost every component in the shifting system, the
Oh
shifter,
wow.
the derailleur, the housing. I actually even got my rear triangle warranted, because as it turned out, there was a kink inside the tube inside the frame, which was pinching the housing just a little bit. In
Hmm.
retrospect, that wasn't enough friction to really be part of the problem. But I think what I learned in all that was just how, like, the tolerances of all the parts in a derailleur are just barely able to support the resolution needed to get a good shift. And so that always stuck with me. And then a couple of years went by, and I've always wanted to work in the bicycle industry. Ever since I got started, I've been working as a mechanical engineer for about 20 years, and this has always been a dream of mine. So last year, late 2023, it was just a good window where I really just got to a point where I was like, you know what, if I don't give this a try, I'm gonna regret it. I'm gonna miss out on my chance. So here I am going for it.
It's good timing. I feel like some people are wanting an alternative. People are really stoked about Ingrid and just what other like other small just drivetrain options there are. So in terms of products, what were the first things that you guys offered?
The very first thing was the rebuild kits for the SRAM mechanical derailleurs and the SRAM Axis Eagle derailleurs. And so we got started with those. And really the reason for that is, um, it's kind of the balance of, like, with Axis in particular, they're pretty high cost. At the same time, one of the issues with those is the bushings do wear out pretty quickly, and the links can twist pretty easily. So, like, it became clear, like, why did we start with those models right at the beginning? A lot of it was just like, there's the most opportunity to deliver value to somebody. and help them get their derailleur working again. What I've found since we got launched with those is, there are customers for the mechanical link upgrades, and they make sense for the higher end models. But like, if you kind of look at it from the perspective of somebody who's just focused on like what's the latest tech, in a way, like that's like old generation stuff. There's definitely like a lot of people out there, and I include myself in this, that electronic shifting still hasn't proven to be better in any sort of fundamental way. Like, I do ride it because I've got it. I'm working on these products every single day, but I go back and forth on different bikes. So I'm passionate about the mechanical rebuild kits, but the reality is like there's not as many people out there looking to rebuild those ones. They're lower cost. They're kind of older generation, so a lot of times people just move on with those older ones. But the higher value derailleurs, yeah, that's where most of our customers are at. And so we get like maybe like 2/3 of people are buying the rebuild kits with our tools and doing it themselves, and then like another third, we actually have a mail-in service, so people are shipping their derailleurs in. I actually rebuild every one. I check them all on a bike, make sure they shift, and with that, it kind of eliminates the I'm not sure how this is going to go if I'm doing it at home sort of problem. And so it just opens it up to more people that have, that don't have the time, or they don't have the interest, or some people love nerding out and just working on their own bikes, all day
Yeah.
long, all night long, and stuff like that. But not everyone has that kind of time or interest or whatever. So,
So when you're talking high value derailleurs, like how much are the derailleurs usually cost that you rebuild or offer parts for?
like the axis range is a really good reference there. So the lowest end is the GX model, and it goes for like 300 to 350 new, depending on where you find it. Like, you can find some deals, but generally 300 is the lower end of the range, and 350 is maybe the higher end. I think I've seen it for like 370 in some places, but that's GXX01 goes for about 450 US, and then XX1 is around 600 to 650. So with our like the comparison I like to draw people to, because it's like the center of the bullseye as far as like what ends up actually happening, is usually in about 9 out of 10 derailleurs, if you go with the Madrone links and super shims, that costs about $135. And you can bring, let's say you've got an old GX, just to kind of do the worst case scenario, you're looking at a $300 derailleur, or you can spend 135, get it rebuilt, and actually breathe new life into it. Our bushing tolerances are extremely tight, so all the clearances there are really, really tightly fit to the pins, so that when it starts out new, there's almost no slop in that linkage. Now, you have to have some, because it's a bushing sliding on a pin,
Mhm.
so it's a really delicate balance there to get those really close but not too close. And then the super shims, what that does is it takes the slop out of the mounting bolt, and so the derailleur itself is you kind of eliminate that point of wobble in the whole
Mhm.
assembly, and it's actually at the base of the assembly, so it's like the most critical point. And so those two things really, really take care of a lot of it. We do sell cages, we do sell pulleys, but usually, those aren't necessarily needed, and I don't even necessarily push those too hard with people, because it's if they want to get it for like the full upgrade. You do get a nice durability upgrade with the cages and the pulleys. They're easy to clean. But if you're just looking to get your assembly shifting good again, the links and the super shims is a way to go. And
I remember when like an expensive derailleur was like $70. It
yeah,
blows my mind that now it's like it's almost, half a grand. And like that's one thing that a lot of people don't factor in, is like there's one thing to buy the derailleur, and there's nothing to replace it or have it repaired, because those
yeah,
things are like kind of a sensitive part of the bike.
absolutely. It's out there waiting to be smashed, and it's one of the most complicated fiddly parts on the bike. And I remember, so I grew up riding and racing in the 1990s, and I can remember when you could buy an XT rear derailleur for $50. You could buy an XT cassette for $50. A really good
Right.
wheel set, probably $250. And so those are like my reference points as like what it should be, of course, inflation and everything else. But yeah, so with our newer product that we're working on, the complete rear derailleur, I like to I had an email string yesterday with someone who contacted me. There's a lot of people interested, and then I like to just ask them questions and get their feedback to figure out like, colors and features and cost and
Hmm.
manufacturing location is a big one that comes up with from people. But my goal with the complete derailleur that we're working on is to have we're gonna have to start with a higher cost unit. Like there's just no way around that to kind of take it conservative and make like limited run CNC machine batches, just to kind of walk before we run with this
Hmm.
thing. So the first ones will be high cost, the first sort of CNC batches, but what I really want to be able to arrive at with that product is get to a point where we're cost competitive with XT or X01, kind of in that like mid to high end level,
Hmm.
and just blow them out of the water on like performance and rebuildability, compatibility. So that's really the goal because I mean cycling is an expensive sport, and I really want to be able to get this product out there and be truly something that lots of people would really consider over an alternative.
So what was that time frame from when you guys were just supplying repair parts and doing derailleur repairs to like, oh, we should make our own derailleur?
Madrone is really, in a way, less. It's less than a year old. We were public starting in Sea Otter this year, so that was about four
Well.
and a half, 5 months ago. So we are actually brand new in a way. But it was about halfway through the development of the links, and I'm not sure, not everyone's watching, but the tolerances on these links, these holes, um,
Hmm.
and it really occurred to me that as I tried to solve all the problems that I was finding on the derailleurs that are already out there, I started realizing that if we just started from a clean sheet of paper, we could actually address a lot of these things and just eliminate so many of the headaches with a rebuild. Um,
Hmm.
like one example of that is the bushings. The bushings are press fit into the links, and then inside the idea of the bushing is where the pin rides, and that's where it's supposed to rotate. So you want to have a press fit on the outside of the bushing and a very close slip fit on the inside, and maintaining those tolerances. And then there's also tolerances that show up on the SRAM derailleurs from part to part, like the pins, for example. They can fluctuate, and so really just chasing that stuff around. There's also some interesting compatibility between the different levels of SRAM on the mechanical side. The Axis Eagle is pretty dimensionally. They're all about, if I'm remembering correctly, they're basically interchangeable between all three levels. But on mechanical, that's not true. There's more variety. And so chasing
Hmm.
that around is really difficult. Um, and then, just the end result is good, but it takes a lot of work on our part. Like we have to control a lot of tolerances extremely tightly, in order to arrive at the assembly level, eliminating the slop and all these moving parts. And so that combined with, like we get a lot of people who are talking about clutch adjustability or can I rebuild the SRAM clutch? Unfortunately, you can't. It's like a closed assembly. It's molded into the
Hmm.
plastic knuckle. So there's just a lot of stuff like that where as I've rebuilt, dozens and dozens of these things, I'm just like, yeah, you could do this, you could do that, you could do this other thing. And so that sort of set of like features, I think, is what is driving the new derailleur that we're working on. So I'm pretty happy with where it's at now. Um,
Yeah.
we're on the second generation. The first gen was shown at Sea Otter this year, and then we've been testing it all summer. And then for the Made show, we got to the second generation, and we're testing that right now. So I'd say the linkage itself is working great. The return spring, the bearings, that part of the design, basically like the upper half of the derailleur, I'm really happy with. And right now we're in this phase of basically doing like longer term testing on the clutch, because that's an area where um, I want to be really conservative when we launch this derailleur. It would just be devastating if we get them out there and people are like, "Hey, my clutch wore out," or "the clutch cover fell off and the pieces like shot out of the thing." Like that's something I want to be really careful about, because it is a wear item, and it's a critical part of the whole system functioning correctly. So we're taking our time with the clutch testing, but yes, the clutch will be rebuildable. It will be tunable, so someone could have it set off completely if that's what you prefer, or you can set it up to be extremely stiff, anywhere in between as well. so so that's kind of the idea behind the clutch. And it just, I mean, every part on the new derailleur will be easily serviceable with basic tools. You're not going to need any of the like the specialty tools that we offer for the Axis derailleurs. It'll all be just like standard tools that most people have at home in their own garage or something.
So it sounds like you're doing long-term testing. Like, do you have a rough timeline of when a V1 would be unleashed onto the public?
I think it'll be early 2025 next year.
Okay.
So we're looking at maybe, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 months from now. So we're coming up on it. There's a number of opportunities to get like pre-production units out there. So we might start seeing more of those, maybe in the media. It'll really help spread the word about the derailleur and the company, to get them out there. So there's some chances that we'll see some of them out there that aren't for sale yet. But um, another piece of this is I like the idea that people can sort of follow along with the development. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not like we're going to be hiding what we're doing and hiding, even honestly, even the design. There's no plans to patent any of the stuff that we come up with in here. Is just have it open the whole time. And so
Mm-hmm.
you'll probably see some strange things that don't make it to the production unit on there, and then they'll be tidied up. My goal is to have the first CNC machine batch of these derailleurs available at the beginning of the year. I definitely, through years of experience, learning the hard way, it's always better to just take your time and get it right than it is to like rush and launch a product. I mean, that I'm so convinced about that one. It's so, if it does take longer because of some
Yeah.
like testing issue we discover in November, like it totally will take longer.
Do you think at least the forthcoming near-term batch is that going to be manufactured in the U.S. or overseas?
So that is a great question that people have been asking with Made. And I'm not sure is the answer. I will be quoting in North America. Like there's a few shops now that I've started to network with that there could be some good partnerships there, but it really, in my experience, it is very hard to match the price, but also the quality with Far East manufacturing. Like if I can find a North American machine shop to do like the North American CNC version, and that still results in a cost for that sort of boutique version, if you will, like it'd be like the boutique high end, a lot like the Ingrid derailleur, for example, like we'd be sort
Mm-hmm.
of more directly competing with them. Like that could be an outcome for one of the versions of this derailleur. But like I was saying earlier, I also want to have the low cost, just a great value performance to cost sort
Right.
of version of this thing. And that almost certainly would be made overseas. So it remains to be seen. Like I'm collecting early quotes right now just to get a feel for like what kind of costs we could find. So we're quoting with the prototype designs, but we're getting some like larger quantity quotes and just figuring out
Mm-hmm.
like what, where the sweet spots will be. And so like one of the customers I was talking to yesterday, I was like, what would you pay for a North American CNC version of this derailleur? And I referenced the Ingrid, which I believe is around 600 US dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And then he came back with about 400. And I was like, yeah, I think you're right. Like, I think that's that would be the sweet spot for like what people would pay for something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
that what that does is it gives me like, okay, so I can then figure out what my cost needs to be to make sure that I can hit that, and then use that as sort of the measuring stick for how feasible it is to go with a North American made. There's also the basically the general perceptions of Far East manufacturing and what it is in terms of quality and other things. And I don't think it's not a one size fits all sort of a situation. Um, and so like the shops that I'm networked with from my previous jobs are they're in Shenzhen. The quality is very high. The communication is excellent. They're super high tech. I mean, it's like, you know, they could compete with any U.S. shop. So, you know,
Hmm.
uh, there's just a lot of factors in this, and I'm really open. Like to me, discovering the product, I'm not going to try to like uh, design the product and shove it down people's throats. Like I really want to discover what are people excited about, what actually works. Like for me, especially with these derailleurs, because there's complicated mechanisms. A lot of it is just discovering designs that work. The ones that don't work, we let those go by the wayside and we move on with what works. And I really want this derailleur to be for people when they interact with it to feel like it was designed by a bicycle mechanic. Where
Hmm.
every screw that you touch is easy to access with a wrench. The parts are easy to hold on to. There's no fussy operations that are difficult and confusing. Easier said than done, but that's kind of the guiding light behind the design.
So you've shown the prototypes at Sea Otter and at Made. What's your feedback been? What are people excited about?
People, I'd say like the two main things people are really excited about is the compatibility and how we support basically compatibility with any drivetrain. And it's nothing fancy. It's actually just the cable cam that's on the bottom of one of the links. We can tune that profile to fit any drivetrain. Right now, like a big change that we made from the Gen 1 to the Gen 2 prototype was allocating enough physical space that just about any cam profile could fit. And that was just done by like bookending a bunch of shifters on the pull ratios so that there's a certain amount of space you're going to need if the cam profile, they're not perfect arcs. They're some kind of, actually I tune them for every single gear, so they end up being like a
Mm.
12 speed unit has 12 unique points, each with its own unique radius and angle between each one. And so we start with the first design is as close as we can get in CAD. We 3D print them and then check it on the bike. First, we just measure the difference between the pulley teeth and the cassette teeth, and then invariably the first one is off, or it'll like progressively be more off by one end of the range.
All
Take
right.
notes, go back to CAD, print a new one, and just iterate until that gets tighter and tighter. And then kind of once we're in the really close where the differences are almost imperceptible, then we just shift through it. And it's actually pretty surprising how far it can be off and still
Hmm.
more or less work, which I think is just another sort of insight into how the derailleurs that we see on the market now, they do work and they can handle a decent amount of play in the bushings, but to get that
Hmm.
extremely crisp and like zero confusion shift, you got to kind of take it another level with all these tolerances. So
Yeah.
one of the other things in my head of being a kid who grew up in the 1990s is um, in those days in mountain biking, XTR was better than everything else. And anytime you got on a bike with an XTR derailleur, it shifted better than everything else, and you could actually just feel it. And that's what I want this to be like. And
Hmm.
you know, cautiously optimistic that we're on our way to doing that. So I've been really happy with the testing on the Gen 2 especially, and the thing just moves really precisely, really tight. The return spring design is another area where we're able to really improve the shifting as it goes down to the smaller cogs on the cassette, especially at the smallest end, that it still pulls really strong back there. So
Right.
yeah, I'm really excited about this.
I had a question early on, like why focus on the SRAM derailleurs? Is like Shimano just more trouble free, or were you just like a heavy user of SRAM? That's what you migrated towards.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of conscious thought behind it. It's coincidental that I'm on like my bikes are SRAM, and that's where my focus was at the beginning. Um, like I said earlier, the SRAM axis derailleurs are a pretty high cost derailleur,
Hmm.
and you know the Shimano ones, they don't seem to be known for the problems, at least with the 12 speed as much. Now you do, like, I always pay attention to like comments, like especially on Pink Bike, and I listen to what people are talking about when they're talking about their derailleurs. And there's always people that are talking about how quickly some of them wear out. And I'm not here to cast shade on SRAM or Shimano. Like, those two
Hmm.
companies are awesome. They are what allow us to enjoy this great sport. But you hear about premature wear out on some of them, but like the Shimano mechanical derailleurs, all things considered, they're not the most expensive ones on the market. So you really have to think about,
Hmm.
like, if I'm going to make an aftermarket thing that's going to
Right.
modify somebody else's thing, you always have to consider, like, well, what's a person going to think when they see this? Like, they might just buy a new one, and that's the route
Right.
they go. And
Right.
I
That makes
totally get
sense.
that. Yeah. So like, as cool as it would be to make mod kits for all derailleurs that are under the sun, um, I I don't think that's likely to happen for Madrone. The next one in line, if we were to do more of this, would be the SRAM transmission, because again, it goes back to the same things. It's they're high value derailleurs. Um, Even though they're pushing the spare parts story with those. Like, I've talked to quite a few people who said, yeah, we still have a hard time with that. Um,
Hmm.
but with all that said, like, I think the the real way that Madrone, this whole company, this project is going to take off would be with our own standalone product, and that way we're not chasing around other companies trying to make modification kits. We can actually make our own thing and carve out our own little niche.
Right.
And I also firmly believe that there's electronic shifting hasn't proven to be fundamentally better yet. There's some cool
Hmm.
things with it, like it's kind of techy, and people like to nerd out on it, and like there's all kinds of cool stuff you could do with software and the servos that maybe have yet to be harvested, as benefits and put out there. And so maybe in the long term it does beat out. But like, I mean, you're never going to get around battery. A battery can go dead. I was actually watching
Hmm.
the women's Olympic road race, and I think there was a flat or some mechanical mid race. One of the women, she gets her second bike, and it's got a dead battery. And I'm like, and you can see the mechanic. He swaps the battery. He takes one off the bike that's on the rack on the roof while they're moving, and reinstalls it on the derailleur while she's riding. And she
Right.
loses minutes over this whole thing. And I'm like, you can't tell me how you're going to get around that, other than like having military grade procedures for these racing teams. And so
Yeah.
like, and then bike packing or these like super long distance rides, you're not always going to have the access to charging your batteries up and having them ready to go at all times, or carrying a spare. Like, I just think it's pretty cool. Like, I'm really excited about these mechanical mechanisms and all the ways to eliminate friction and eliminate play in the assembly, and get them shifting just like so beautifully as these like intricate, perfect mechanical mechanisms that are just a lot of fun. And it's really cool that they're purely mechanical. You don't need.
I mean, for me, I feel like, it's novel. Um, but at the end of the day, you're just asking a pulley wheel to like move a couple of millimeters. And also, it seems, at least to me, it introduces like a whole nother point of failure. There's like the mechanical side, but then there's this whole other, the electronic side of, the servo motors and what have you, that can sometimes go bad. Like we've all had experiences with electronics just like suddenly dying or just showing up DOA. It's
Yeah.
something that happens, and at that point, Unless you want to pop things open and bust out the soldering iron, what are you going to do?
Oh yeah, I mean it's very true. The first so Aaron Bailey is a local college student here at Ashland at Southern Oregon University, and he's right on that threshold of going pro. He's racing in the U20, or he just raced an Enduro World Cup, so he's right there. But he's not really sponsored yet, other than by us and a couple other small ones. But the first time I met him, he came to me. It was at Sea Otter, and we rebuilt his derailleur there. But he had the pogo pin contacts for the battery were all stuck down. You could get some grit in those things, and like you
Mm-hmm.
said, that's another point of reliability failure that you don't have with a purely mechanical system. Now, it's not quite apples to apples because there's also a cable, and there's lots of things that could go wrong with your cable assembly. You can have that get torn up if it gets hooked on something, or long term you see a lot of them that are just like worn out and they need to be replaced, but people don't replace them right away. So there's other, it's kind of a trade there, but I think in general um, there's a lot of years of history and development with mechanical cables that they're pretty well refined at this point. Battery contacts, batteries, there's a lot of ways batteries can fail. Um, my background in engineering, I spent a lot of years developing batteries for small electric vehicles. So,
Okay.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, I can tell you that there's plenty of things that can give you headaches and keep you up at night with batteries.
Yeah. Like the other, for me in particular, like I'm never happy with the stock gearing options. I always feel like it's geared too high. It's definitely targeted towards the performance end of cycling. So unless you can live with the gearing options that's presented to you, then can't do anything with electronic. But with mechanical, there are so many ways. I mean, that's why we started the Peak Mechanical series, is to show like all the different ways that you can hack together a drivetrain that's customized to you. And it's because you can work within those tolerances. There's no walled garden of protocol between shifters and derailleurs other than like cable pull, but you can manipulate that.
It is really nice that most generally speaking, although it's not true across the board, but yeah, you can mix and match chains on different tooth profiles and things like that.
Going back to compatibility, it sounds as if you're going to initially probably build around the SRAM shifter. Is there any reason why the forthcoming derailleur couldn't work with Shimano as well?
No, none whatsoever. Yeah, so we've got this space allocation underneath the linkage that allows us to have like quite a wide variety of like these cam profile. Like the radius is an area where, let's say we didn't give enough space for that, the radius of that cam can actually crash into the cage. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was um, a big part of the Gen 2 design was measuring shifter pull for a bunch of common ones and then allocating a little bit of space and leaving ourselves some room to like be able to, potentially have cam profiles that we're not even thinking about today, like just so that it's a
Mm-hmm.
little bit future proof there. So yes, 100%. The interestingly for MTB, just for any curious people out there, like the SRAM shifter pull in 12 speed mechanical is very close to the Shimano. So the first time I put it was a SRAM, it was a Shimano shifter, and I had everything set up for SRAM. It actually shifted great. With that said, like we'll still probably dial in like a very like you could literally have a Madrone cam for every shifter and cassette combination. So I imagine at
Mm-hmm.
some point on the website there will be a configurator where you can select the right one from a pull down menu, and there might be a table just to really explain clearly like we've done the work to create cams for this combination, for that combination, this other weird one that
Mm-hmm.
you asked about last month, that kind of thing. So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And mountain, so like mountain drop bar shifting, 11 and 12 speed for sure. And I think like as time goes on, we can create more of these. But if there turns out to be a lot of interest in 10 speed, we can do that as well. So with the derailleur and its like multi-compatible approach, there's there's like three main variables that would allow this to be configured. The first one is the one we're talking about, which is the compatibility, the cam on the bottom. That's an easy part to swap. And then the second variable is the mounting style. So it could mount conventionally on a derailleur hanger, like most do. But now
Mm-hmm.
with things like the SRAM transmission, this direct mount style, whatever you want to call that, the UDH direct mount or whatever, it's easily adaptable to that with a different mounting bolt and this exterior plate. So there's a configuration twist there for those who want it. And then the cage length would be another one. If your drivetrain
Mm-hmm.
has an extremely wide range, you're going to want a longer cage. If it's mid cage length for something middle of the road, or or even short cage for something like downhill or like road racing, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Have you experimented with I know like with a like jockey pulley diameter? Because I've seen some derailleurs where that's how they increase capacities. Instead of getting a longer cage, they just use like a bigger jockey pulley.
Yeah, that's an interesting one for maybe fine tuning, but it's something I have pondered quite a bit, but we haven't honestly explored too much right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's got two 14 tooth pulleys, so 14 on the bottom, 14 on the top. Another common twist would be like a 14-12, where 12 is the smaller one on the top. One aspect of a smaller pulley up high, there's kind of a trade off. So there's going to be some amount of slop in that bearing where the pulley can actually tilt a little bit. And so you could argue, like, no, I want it to be I want that position of the teeth to be right where I want it. Or do you want it to be able to tolerate a little bit of movement? And I think what it comes down to is like how much slop is already in the complete assembly and whether you need that tolerance or not. But generally, with the way my derailleur is going, it's going the direction of precision, and so I think we can get away with something tighter there. So back to the pulley tooth count. Um, the larger diameter, the more amplified any bearing play is.
Okay.
And so that would be the downside of going bigger. The plus side of going bigger would be, the kind of stuff you read about with like the oversized pulleys. And I'm not trying to, go that direction with any of this, but, you do get less rotational movement on the chain bushings, as the chain meshes onto the pulley because of the larger diameter. So like that would be a sort of a theoretical efficiency gain you could
Mm-hmm.
make. But I think honestly, it'll probably be somewhere in the 12, 13, 14 tooth range on the upper. And then the lower
Yeah.
one kind of remains to be seen. Material is another variable that we're looking at as well, like to use like some sort of engineered plastic like Delran or maybe a glass filled nylon or Delrin type material. That's an
Mm-hmm.
area where I have a lot of questions, and we haven't really delved into that with any testing. All the pulleys that we make right now are just 6061 aluminum, so that works great. It lasts a long time. I'd say the downside with that material is for the same volume of material used in the part, it's going to be a little bit heavier than pretty much any polymer. And
Mm-hmm.
then second, it's they make a little bit more of a rattling noise when there's a lot of tension in the chain, like if you're in the
Yeah.
biggest cog. So you'll hear it a bit more. So those are the two main downsides with the aluminum. But these are all questions that, like, as we get further and we're able to spend more time with testing and just kind of answer the questions. And
Well, so one more question that I know, like, I emailed you about, but I think other listeners or viewers of the channel would be interested in is like, would the derailleur be compatible with a 2-by?
yeah, absolutely. And a big way we can do that, like I said earlier, um, if we're talking about drop bar bikes, the cam allows you to do that in the cage length. So yeah, 100%.
Cool. Well, is there anything else people should know about Madrone, and how should they follow your progress?
A good way to follow us is there's a page on the website actually called Derailleur Development, and we're posting updates there sort of on a less frequent basis. But each time we kind of get to like a new, sort of a new testing conclusion or a new prototype design where we've covered some ground and we've come back out, okay, this worked and that didn't. That'll show up
Yeah.
there, and that's a good place to follow us. So that's at madronecycles.com. You can follow it. And then we're also on Instagram, but the posts might vary a little bit. There's not necessarily like a development story there, although we do
Right.
post things like, we're shipping to these new countries. There's a sale on cages. Aaron, like I said, was just racing in France at the Enduro World Cup, so there's a post there that he put up on his race, and that it's just fun stuff on Instagram.
All right. Cool. Well, thanks for chatting today, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this interview with Aaron from Drone. Super excited about what they're doing. I'll put all the relevant links below. Thanks for being on the show, and as always, keep the supple side down.